Raider Nation, this offseason just got a lot more interesting. A receiver that every contender wants might be headed to the desert, and the fit makes too much sense to ignore. A defensive end nobody drafted just showed up ready to fight for a roster spot. The quarterback room looks nothing like it did 3 months ago, and somebody is about to get pushed out the door. And a cornerback with first-round talent fell into our lap on day 3 for a reason. Let's talk about all of it. The Raiders need a #1 receiver, and everyone knows it. And the name that keeps coming up is Brandon Aiyuk. San Francisco is done with him. That much is clear. He tore his ACL and MCL back in October, missed the rest of the season, and his relationship with the 49ers fell apart so bad that they voided his guaranteed money because he refused to rehab at the team facility. That's a messy situation. But messy doesn't mean finished. ESPN analyst Mina Kimes went on NFL Live and said flat out that Las Vegas is a team that really needs to add a receiver, and that Aiyuk makes sense for this offense. She's right. Look at what the Raiders actually have at wide receiver right now. Trey Tucker, Jalen Nailor, who they brought in from Minnesota, and Jack Beck, who they drafted last year. That's not a group that scares anybody. Nailor could be a solid #2, but there's no true #1 in that room. Nobody who can take the top off a defense and demand double coverage. And here's the part that really matters. Kimes pointed out that nobody on this roster matches what Fernando Mendoza actually does well as a passer. He throws those beautiful back shoulder balls, those out routes with touch and timing. You need a receiver who runs those routes at a high level. Right now, that guy doesn't exist on this depth chart. The 49ers aren't cutting Aiyuk. John Lynch made that clear. San Francisco wants a trade, and they're willing to wait. That means the Raiders would have to give something up to get him. Is it worth it? A receiver coming off a torn ACL and MCL with a complicated situation off the field? That's a real risk. But Aiyuk is built different. When he's healthy, he's a legitimate #1 who can change what this offense looks like entirely. Raider Nation has been waiting for this front office to make a move that actually changes the ceiling of this team. This might be that phone call worth making. 22.5 tackles for loss and 11 sacks in college. And not one team drafted him, but the Raiders were smart enough to sign defensive end Kian Sloan as an undrafted free agent out of NC State. He spent 1 year there after transferring from Utah State, and what he put on tape was a guy who plays with a motor that absolutely refuses to shut off. Lance Zierlein at NFL.com said his urgency is something opponents rarely match, and that he challenges blocks with aggressive first actions while always making hunting the football the priority. That's exactly the kind of player you want grinding for a roster spot when training camp opens in the desert heat. Now, nobody is walking in here saying Sloan starts. The Raiders already have 6 defensive ends on the roster, including Maxx Crosby, Kwity Paye signed in free agency after Baltimore backed out of that Crosby trade, and Malcolm Kuhn back for another run. The competition is real, and the depth chart is legitimate in the best possible way. But undrafted guys who stick around in this league do it one way: special teams. Sloan has the energy, the relentlessness, and the football instincts to be exactly that contributor. And Zierlein himself said a special teams role is his most realistic path to making this roster. That's not a consolation prize. That's a real opportunity for someone built to outwork everyone in the building. On the other side of this draft class, the Raiders made a 4th-round selection that has analysts talking for completely different reasons. Former Tennessee cornerback Germod McCoy was a first-round talent before a torn ACL wiped out his entire 2025 season and sent him sliding all the way to day 3. Las Vegas grabbed him, and the Athletics' Saad Yousuf called it one of the best value picks in the whole draft. If that knee holds up, this pick has steal of the draft written all over it. 2 very different stories, 2 guys with everything to prove. Drop your take in the comments. I want to know which one you believe in more heading into camp. So here's where we stand. The Raiders need a true #1 receiver, and Aiyuk is right there. But the injury risk and the baggage are real. This draft also brought in a first-round talent at a 4th-round price. Moves are being made. But Raider Nation, I need your take. Do you trust this front office to pull the trigger on Aiyuk, or is the risk too high? Drop it in the comments right now and hit that like button. Because what's happening in the quarterback room right now, that's a whole different level of drama. The Raiders walked into this offseason with 1 quarterback on the roster, and that quarterback was Aidan O'Connell. And now he's looking around a room that has Fernando Mendoza, Kirk Cousins, and 2 undrafted rookie quarterbacks, and realizing his time in Las Vegas is probably over. Sports Illustrated's Justin Mello said it straight. O'Connell is a holdover from the previous regime and isn't expected to survive past training camp. And honestly, it's hard to argue with that. This new front office brought in Cousins in free agency, used the #1 overall pick on Mendoza, and then added 2 more quarterbacks as undrafted free agents. If they thought O'Connell had any real future here, none of that happens. He went from being the only quarterback on this roster to being 3rd on the depth chart at best, and that's being generous. Now the question is, what happens next? Mello believes the Raiders will trade or release him at some point this offseason, and a trade makes more sense than a cut. O'Connell has 17 starts under his belt and 20 touchdowns against 11 interceptions for his career. He's not a star, but he's experienced, and backup quarterbacks with real starting experience have value around this league. The Raiders probably aren't getting more than a 6th-round pick for him, but that beats nothing. Meanwhile, the real story in that quarterback room is what happens between Cousins and Mendoza. Head coach Clint Kubiak has a tight relationship with Cousins going back years, and there's real sentiment around the league that Mendoza could be protected by sitting and developing behind a veteran. Mendoza himself sounds like someone who gets it. He said leadership is earned, not given, and that he's coming in with a low ego, ready to learn. That's the right answer. But just win, baby, isn't built on patience alone. At some point, the #1 overall pick has to play. The clock on that decision is already ticking, and O'Connell leaving might just be the first domino to fall in a quarterback situation that isn't close to being settled yet. A first-round talent sitting in the 4th round is not an accident, and the Raiders knew exactly what they were doing when they selected cornerback Germod McCoy out of Tennessee. Before the torn ACL wiped out his entire 2025 season, this was a guy who analysts had pegged as a top 15 pick. Teams ran from the medicals, and Las Vegas walked straight toward them. Dr. David Chow went on Sports Injury Central and was brutally honest about it. McCoy probably fails a physical today, but the talent is undeniable, and at a 4th-round price, the value is impossible to ignore. Chow put it perfectly. It's like buying a Louis Vuitton bag with a scratch. At full price, you walk away, but at the right number, you pull the trigger without hesitation. That's exactly what the Raiders did. CBS Sports analyst Bryant McFadden was even stronger about it. He called McCoy his steal of the entire 2026 NFL draft. McFadden said this was a guy with top 15 pick tape, and that whichever team drafted him has to find a way to maximize everything they can get out of him because of the health concerns. He believes if McCoy gets 3 or 4 healthy years, he's the most talented cornerback in that Raiders room right now among the experienced guys. That's not a small statement. That's a massive vote of confidence for a player who hasn't taken an NFL snap yet. McCoy himself sounds ready. He said his doctors told him his knee is good, and that if the Raiders want him to do something for the longevity of his career, he's willing because he trusts they have his best interest. That attitude matters. A player who comes in humble, healthy enough to work, and hungry to prove every team that passed on him wrong, that's the kind of guy who becomes a cornerstone. We feel this one in our chest. Every single one of us who has watched this franchise reach for players who weren't ready and pay for it for years. If McCoy stays healthy, this pick doesn't just look smart in April. It looks franchise-changing by October. This week showed exactly what this front office is trying to build. A receiver with elite talent is being linked to this offense for real reasons. The quarterback room got completely remade, and the future is wearing #1 overall. And a cornerback who fell to day 3 because of medicals, not talent, is now ours to develop. Every move tells you something about where this team is headed. Raider Nation, drop your take in the comments. This space belongs to everyone who screams, "Just win, baby," and never gives up. Tomorrow we have more, and you don't want to miss it.